The hot Arizona sun had barely begun to dip behind the jagged hills when the town of Dry Creek started to hum with the familiar evening bustle. The wooden boardwalks creaked under the footsteps of ranch hands, drifters, and the occasional gambler looking for luck that never seemed to stay. Dust swirled along the main street, catching the fading light like golden smoke. From somewhere beyond the corral, a frantic neigh cut through the clamor, sharp and insistent. Inside the Dry Creek Saloon, the atmosphere was thick with smoke, the smell of whiskey, and the low murmur of conversation. The piano played a slow, ragged tune, and the bartender, Slim Hargrove, polished a glass with a rag that had seen better days. Patrons cast half-interested glances at the door, expecting another weary cowboy or stranger seeking a drink to wash the dust of the plains from their throat. Then it burst through. A small, tawny Mustang foal, its mane tangled and eyes wide with fear, bolted into the saloon. Hooves clattered across the floorboards, knocking over a chair, sending a pitcher of ale tipping onto the floor. The foal's nostrils flared, and it whinnied again, a high-pitched, desperate sound that silenced the room in a heartbeat. "Well, I'll be damned," muttered one of the cowhands, steadying himself against the bar. "What in tarnation's a horse doin' inside a saloon?" The foal skidded to a stop near the swinging doors of the back, ears pinned flat, head bobbing as it searched for an escape. Its small, trembling body radiated panic, and everyone in the room felt the urgency, even if none could explain it. Slim Hargrove leaned over the bar, squinting. "Looks like it's tryin' to tell us something," he said. His voice barely carried over the sudden quiet. Just then, the town marshal, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Jedediah Kane, stepped in from the street. He had ridden hard all day, following a lead on a cattle-rustling ring, and his hat sat crooked on his head, dust streaked across his tan leather duster. Kane's eyes immediately caught the frantic foal. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, kneeling slowly. The foal took a cautious step backward, then pawed at the floor, whinnying in frustration. The saloon's patrons whispered among themselves, some amused, some genuinely concerned. The foal suddenly bolted again, but this time it darted toward the back door, glancing back as if urging Kane to follow. Without hesitation, the marshal was on his feet, calling out, "Everyone stay put." Slim Hargrove shook his head. "Ain't never seen the likes of this. That foal's got some sense, more'n most folks in Dry Creek." The marshal jogged after the foal, swinging open the door and stepping into the late afternoon heat. The foal's small hooves kicked up clouds of red dust as it led Kane out of town, down a narrow trail that wound along the edge of the hills. Its movements were erratic, but there was an intelligence behind them, a purpose that refused to be ignored. Kane followed, his boots sinking into the dry soil, hand resting on the butt of his Colt. The foal's eyes flicked back constantly, as if checking that the marshal was keeping pace. It paused at a ridge and looked out over a narrow canyon, ears twitching. Kane squinted into the shadows and caught sight of movement. Figures crouched low, barely visible among the rocks and scrub. Bandits. Kane's heart raced. He had been hunting these men for weeks, but their hideout had been a mystery, their tracks carefully erased. And now, here was a frightened foal, leading him straight to them. The irony wasn't lost on him, but there wasn't time to ponder it. He dropped to one knee behind a boulder, watching the bandits. There were 4 of them, all armed with rifles and pistols. Their faces were hardened, mean, and Kane recognized the scars of their last raid on the neighboring ranch. He needed a plan, and fast. The foal, sensing Kane's tension, nuzzled against his boot, giving a soft nicker. Kane crouched lower, whispering, "Don't worry, little fella. We'll take care of this." He scanned the canyon for cover, noting the outcroppings and the dry brush. He could flank the bandits from the left, get them before they realized he was there, but he had to move quickly. The foal pawed at the ground impatiently, and Kane understood. It was urging him, insisting the moment was now. Drawing his Colt, Kane moved stealthily along the ridge, keeping low. The bandits were oblivious, arguing over something Kane couldn't hear from this distance. They hadn't spotted the foal either, which was lucky, considering the way it darted between rocks to keep him close. When he was within range, Kane fired a warning shot over their heads. The echo rolled through the canyon, sharp and terrifying. The bandits froze, then spun around, eyes wide. "Marshal Kane," one of them cursed. How in hell did you? But Cain had already dropped behind another boulder, and the foal darted into the open, whinnying loudly and kicking up dirt, distracting the bandits. Cain seized the moment, firing again, this time more deliberately. The crack of his Colt echoed, and one of the men went down, clutching his arm. The foal circled, never letting the bandits regain their composure. It was a whirlwind of frantic motion and determination, leading Cain as he advanced. They were like a single unit, the animal and the lawman, moving in sync, the fear and intelligence of the foal guiding the marshal's hands and aim. By the time the dust had settled, Cain stood panting on the ridge, rifle in hand, for bandits tied up with rough-hewn ropes. The foal, trembling but proud, pawed at the ground, its eyes bright. Cain knelt beside it, scratching its mane. "Reckon you're the smartest little horse I've ever met," he said, a rare smile breaking across his rugged face. He looked down at the bandits, who were glaring but subdued, and then toward the canyon. Hidden among the rocks, partially buried under a tarp, Cain found crates of stolen gold and silver, jewels that glinted even in the fading light. His jaw tightened. This was the stash he'd been chasing for weeks, now uncovered thanks to a foal who had run straight into a saloon as if to announce, "Follow me." The sun dipped below the hills, casting long shadows across the canyon, and Cain stood, looking at the small animal who had changed the course of justice in Dry Creek forever. The townsfolk would never believe it, he knew. A frightened Mustang foal, running in panic, leading the town marshal to a hidden treasure and a gang of outlaws. It was a story too strange to be true, but Cain knew it had happened. He would tell it anyway, and maybe, just maybe, someone would finally learn that sometimes courage comes on 4 small hooves. He mounted his horse, the foal trotting beside him as they returned to town. Dust rose behind them like a trail of gold, and Cain felt a rare lightness in his chest. Tonight, Dry Creek slept a little safer, and he owed it all to a little Mustang who had refused to be ignored. By the time Marshal Cain and the foal crested the final hill, the lights of Dry Creek flickered in the twilight like a cluster of fireflies. The town was quiet now, the earlier clamor of the saloon replaced by the gentle murmur of the wind through the boardwalks. Cain nudged his horse forward, the foal trotting faithfully at his side, tail swishing with nervous energy. When they reached the edge of town, Slim Hargrove was waiting, leaning against the saloon's swinging doors. His eyes widened when he saw the foal beside Cain, ears alert and chest heaving from exertion. "Well, I'll be hornswoggled," Slim said, scratching his head. "You mean to tell me this little thing led you right to those bandits?" Cain dismounted, patting the foal's head. "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Slim. Didn't just lead me to them, led me to their stash too." He nodded toward the canyon, where the fading light barely revealed the tied-up outlaws and the glint of stolen treasure. "We've got to secure this before someone else comes sniffing around." Slim's jaw dropped. "Gold and jewels, out in the open like that? That's a fortune, Marshal." Cain didn't answer. His eyes were scanning the horizon. Bandits weren't usually alone. They had friends, families, or other accomplices. Cain needed to move fast, gather the townsfolk, and make sure the stolen loot didn't vanish before it could be secured. He turned to the foal. "You ready for a little more work, little one?" The foal gave a soft nicker, pawing at the ground. Cain smiled grimly. Somehow, this tiny creature had just saved the town, and now it seemed determined to stick with him. By the time the first lanterns were lit along the boardwalks, Cain had gathered a small posse. Slim, 2 ranch hands, and the town blacksmith, a burly man named Harris. They rode together toward the canyon, the foal leading the way, ears swiveling as if listening for whispers carried on the wind. The bandits were still groaning in frustration when Cain arrived. They struggled against the ropes, but it was no use. The marshal had tied them too well, and the posse now stood firmly between them and escape. Cain moved among them, his gaze sharp, his voice steady. "You boys thought you could hide here, make off with what didn't belong to you. But you didn't count on this little one," he said, nodding to the foal. The bandits laughed weakly, their bravado crumbling. "A horse?" one scoffed. "You're serious?" "I'm serious," Cain replied. "Follow me, and maybe you'll live to tell the tale. Or stay put, and I'll make sure the law remembers you for the rest of your sorry lives." The laughter died out, replaced by uneasy silence. The posse began corralling the bandits toward town. The foal trotted beside Kane, ears flicking, eyes scanning the shadows. It seemed to know, instinctively, that danger still lingered. As they neared the boardwalk, Kane noticed movement on a ridge overlooking the town. More men, bandits, probably sent as lookouts, were watching, rifles poised. Kane's stomach tightened. He had underestimated them. Slim hissed, "Marshal, they've got friends up there. Don't think they're just gonna let us stroll in with their pals in tow." Kane's mind raced. He needed to draw the lookout's attention away without putting the posse in danger. The foal, as if reading his thoughts, bolted ahead, nickered, and kicked up a cloud of dust. The two men froze, confused by the small animal's sudden appearance, giving Kane the opening he needed. "Move!" he barked, spurring his horse forward and signaling the posse to follow. Bullets whizzed past, but the small group pushed on, weaving between buildings and using the town's shadows for cover. The foal darted around corners, a blur of tan and white, leading Kane straight into an alley that allowed them to flank the ridge. The bandits on the ridge didn't anticipate the move. By the time they realized, Kane and the posse were already in position, rifles leveled and voices booming. "Drop 'em!" Kane shouted. Caught off guard, the lookout bandits had no choice but to surrender. Kane's quick thinking, aided by the foal's unusual intelligence and courage, had neutralized the threat without a single shot fired at close range. By nightfall, the town square was alive with activity. Citizens came out of their homes and shops, eyes wide at the sight of Kane leading both the captured bandits and the small foal who had guided him through peril. Crates of gold and jewels were stacked near the sheriff's office, guarded carefully by the marshal and his posse. Mayor Whitcomb, a wiry man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, hurried forward. "Marshal Kane, is it true? Did that little horse lead you to the bandits and the treasure?" Kane gave a modest nod. "It's true, sir. This little one here deserves more credit than I do." He knelt beside the foal, stroking its neck. The animal nuzzled him in return, a gesture of trust and companionship that drew murmurs from the crowd. A cheer rose from the townsfolk, though some shook their heads in disbelief. A frightened Mustang foal saving Dry Creek from outlaws and uncovering stolen riches? It sounded like a story from the dime novels, not real life. Yet there it was, impossible to deny. Slim Hargrove clapped his hands, breaking the astonished silence. "Well, I reckon we oughta throw a little celebration. Drinks on the house tonight for everyone." Laughter and cheers followed. Children ran to pet the foal, marveling at its courage, while adults whispered excitedly among themselves, sharing the unbelievable story as if to confirm it really had happened. Kane allowed himself a small smile, though his mind stayed sharp, already thinking of the next steps. The bandits would be taken to the county jail at first light, Kane knew. Their accomplices, if any remained, would scatter after seeing their leaders captured. The town was safe for now, but he could never let his guard down entirely. As the saloon doors swung open and the piano started again, Kane leaned back against a post, watching the foal interact with the townsfolk. It pranced awkwardly, ears twitching, a small hero who didn't fully understand the magnitude of its deeds. Kane chuckled softly. "Never thought I'd be following a horse to catch criminals," he murmured. "But then again, life's full of surprises in the West." The foal whinnied softly in response, as if agreeing, and Kane felt a rare sense of peace. For tonight, Dry Creek was safe. The bandits were caught, the treasure recovered, and the town had a story that would be told for generations. And at the heart of it all was a small, frightened Mustang who had refused to run from danger, leading a weary marshal to justice. But even as the celebration carried on, Kane's eyes lingered on the hills. Somewhere out there, he knew, other dangers were waiting. And the foal, now more companion than guide, would be by his side, ready to face whatever the desert had left in store. The next morning, Dry Creek stirred slowly beneath a pale, orange dawn. The town had settled into a rare calm, the echoes of last night's celebration still clinging to the boardwalks. Kane woke early, as he always did, the memory of the foal leading him through the canyon still fresh in his mind. He fed his horse and checked his colt, every movement precise and deliberate. The small Mustang foal, meanwhile, had taken to wandering the edge of town, nostrils twitching as it sniffed the morning air. Kane watched it from the sheriff's office porch, a strange sense of admiration swelling in his chest. There was intelligence in those wide eyes, courage in those small hooves, and loyalty that seemed almost human. Slim Hargrove approached, carrying a tin cup of strong coffee. "Marshal," he said, leaning against the porch railing, "you planning on lettin' that foal just wander loose? Seems like it's got a knack for gettin' folks out of trouble." Kane smiled, sipping his coffee. It's more than just a horse, Slim. That little one saved the town last night. I reckon it deserves to stay free, for now." Slim grunted. "Free, huh? You don't worry 'bout it wanderin' back into danger." Kane shook his head. "If it does, it'll be followin' me again. Something tells me that foal's got a way of knowin' what needs done." Meanwhile, in the town square, the captured bandits were being led into the makeshift jail, grumbling and glaring at every passerby. Crates of gold and silver were inventoried and locked up in the sheriff's office, the treasures of the canyon now safe. Kane had already notified the county officials, but he knew it would take days for the word to reach the proper authorities. Until then, Dry Creek remained under his watchful eye. By mid-morning, the town had returned to its usual rhythm. Ranch hands and traders moved along the dusty streets, children played between the storefronts, and the foal wandered closer to Kane, stepping carefully beside him as he walked. The bond between the marshal and the small Mustang had formed overnight, forged in dust, fear, and adrenaline. Kane paused at the edge of town and looked toward the hills where the bandits had made their hideout. The canyon loomed in the distance, shadowed and silent, holding secrets of its own. He felt a chill of unease. Bandits rarely operated alone, and he suspected that not all of them had been caught. The foal whinnied softly, as if sharing his concern, and Kane nodded. "We'll keep watch, little one," he murmured, scratching the foal's neck. "If trouble comes, we'll face it together." Just as he spoke, a rider appeared over the ridge, dust trailing behind him. Kane squinted. It was a scout, a local rancher known for keeping an eye on the surrounding hills. The man rode quickly into town, dismounting near Kane. "Marshal Kane," he called out of breath. "You need to see this. Out by the canyon. There's something strange." Kane's brow furrowed. He mounted his horse quickly, signaling the foal to follow. The townsfolk watched with curiosity as the marshal rode toward the canyon, the foal prancing energetically beside him. As they approached, Kane noticed unusual tracks in the dirt, hoof prints that didn't match any of the local stock. They led deeper into the hills, toward a hidden ravine that even he hadn't explored before. Kane's pulse quickened. Something was out there, something the bandits had been guarding, or perhaps something else entirely. The foal hesitated at the edge of the ravine, ears pinned and eyes wide. Kane dismounted, crouching beside it. "Easy, little one. Lead the way, but we stay alert." They descended slowly, the rocky terrain crunching beneath their feet. The foal moved cautiously, then paused near a cluster of boulders. Kane followed its gaze and froze. Behind the rocks lay a narrow cave entrance, half hidden by shadows. From within, the faint glimmer of something metallic reflected the morning light. Kane drew his Colt and signaled for the scout to stay back. The foal, unafraid, stepped forward and nudged the marshal gently, urging him onward. Kane took a deep breath and entered the cave, the Mustang following closely, hooves silent on the stone floor. Inside, the cave widened into a hidden chamber. Crates and barrels were stacked along the walls, and the unmistakable clink of coins echoed softly. Kane's eyes widened. This was more than just a stash of stolen goods. It was a hidden base, carefully concealed from any passing traveler. Maps and notes were scattered across a rough-hewn table, evidence of a network of bandits operating far beyond Dry Creek. The foal whinnied softly, as if acknowledging the discovery. Kane felt a surge of gratitude toward the small creature. Without its frantic lead into the saloon and then the hills, he would have never found this secret stronghold. "Looks like we've got more work ahead of us, little one," Kane murmured. He carefully catalogued the items, taking note of the maps and ledgers. This information could help dismantle the bandit network completely. The foal circled him, restless but alert, ears flicking at every sound. Cain knew he had a companion who wasn't just a horse. This was a partner, a guide, a guardian of sorts. Together, they could face whatever the hills held. By the time they returned to Dry Creek, the sun was high. Cain secured the evidence in the sheriff's office, sending word to the county authorities. Townsfolk had gathered again, curious about his return. When they saw the foal trotting beside him, the crowd murmured in awe. Slim Hargrove clapped his hands, laughing. "Marshal, I think this little one deserves a place in town. Ain't every day a horse saves the day twice." Cain nodded. "I reckon you're right, Slim. For now, it stays with me. We'll see what comes next." As the day wore on, life in Dry Creek returned to its usual rhythm. Children played along the boardwalks, ranch hands went about their work, and the foal wandered the edges of town, alert and watchful. Cain knew that peace in the West was always fleeting, but he felt a rare sense of security. With the foal by his side, he believed they could handle whatever the desert threw at them next. That night, as the last lanterns flickered against the wooden buildings, Cain sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, the foal nuzzling his shoulder. The stars began to emerge in the wide, velvet sky, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. Cain whispered softly, "We did good today, partner. We did good." The foal responded with a soft nicker, a sound full of pride and understanding. Cain smiled. Life in Dry Creek would never be the same, and he knew stories of the courageous little Mustang would be told for generations. In a town full of drifters, gamblers, and rustlers, a small, frightened foal had become a hero, and in doing so, had reminded everyone that courage comes in the most unexpected forms. For Marshal Cain, it was clear. In the wide, harsh expanse of the Old West, sometimes the most unlikely allies make all the difference. And as long as he and the foal rode together, justice would always find a way, even if it came on 4 small hooves. The desert wind whispered through the hills, carrying the promise of tomorrow, but Cain and the foal were ready. Together, they would face the unknown, fearless, bound by trust, and forever marked by the adventure that began with a frightened Mustang running into a saloon.